I live in Phoenix, Arizona, in a one-bedroom off 27th Avenue where the asphalt keeps yesterday's heat and gives it back at midnight like interest. From the carport, I can see the Camelback ridges black against a sky the color of a burner. I'm 37, divorced, dad to a 9-year-old with a backpack full of glitter pens, and I drive one of those anonymous blue vans for a contractor the warehouse calls a delivery service partner, which is a long way to say I carry other people's doorbells in a tote. My daughter, Mia, stays with me Thursdays and every other weekend. On my fridge is a picture of us standing in front of a sagging saguaro, both of us squinting like we're trying to read the desert. People who don't live here say dry heat, like it's a compliment. That's true until June, and then the air feels like opening an oven and finding the weather inside. By 8 a.m., the van thermometer is lying politely at 112. By noon, it's honest enough to be rude. I start at 6:15 because the sun pretends to be reasonable for an hour and a half. I freeze bottles overnight and stack them in a soft cooler like a tiny glacier I'm gonna ask too much of. Before I pull out of the lot, I touch the side of my neck and count. 1, 2. Just to remind my heart we're doing this together. The map sends me everywhere, but the route that carved its name into my ribs is the mobile home park off Van Buren, where porches are living rooms and swamp coolers spit heat like hair dryers. On the day the air went purple on the weather app, the forecast said 118 in the shade, which is a desert joke. The company texted a cheerful hydrate GIF and sent the load anyway. By noon my shirt had dried into salt topography. House 47 had a porch thermometer that announced 122 like a dare. I knocked, set a box between a faded flamingo and a plant determined to learn how to live on memory, and walked back to the van pretending the sun wasn't chewing the backs of my knees. Space 52 had its door propped with a paint can. A box fan pushed hot air across hot air like an apology. Package, I called, because you don't just enter people's quiet. A voice from inside said, thin as paper. In here. She was in an armchair by the stove. Gray hair pasted to her forehead, shirt stuck to clavicles, eyes unfocused like the heat had stolen the labels off things. The air was oven dry and dog food sweet. A little dog with the personality of a sheriff stared at me as if I were trespassing. You okay, ma'am? I asked with the tone that knows the answer. Water, she said, and her hands made a searching motion through the air like there should have been a table there. I pulled the van under her awning because any shade is an ambulance. I cranked the AC until the blower lied loudly enough to matter and ran back with bottles. Small sips, I said, because movies taught us all the wrong medicine and EMTs had later corrected me. I soaked a t-shirt in the sink and laid it across the back of her neck. The dog watched like he was measuring bail. I called 911 and listened to it ring long enough to wonder if I'd misdialed. A dispatcher finally came on, voice clipped and steady. All units are tied up. Keep cooling. I'm sending you a cue. From next door, the neighbor kid arrived in a superhero towel, hair tipped in chlorine. My grandma puts ice on her wrists, he said, serious as a paramedic. We raided his freezer for cubes and peas. I moved the fan to the floor because the air tastes colder where it learns to be air. The woman, Carla, she said, breath hitching, squeezed my fingers once like she remembered the trick of being here. We waited for sirens that were busy elsewhere and did the small stubborn things you do when the day wants you to quit. Shade, water, air, names. When fire finally turned down the lane, the medic stepped out with sun already in her eyes. She touched Carla's forehead and said, heat stroke, like a verdict and a prayer. They moved like people who've learned the choreography. For monitor pads, sheet into stretcher, efficient, kind, relentless. Carla made a sound that meant anger at being helped and relief at not being alone. You did right, the medic told me, which didn't remove the trembling from my hands. The little dog let me scratch his head once, like an official pardon. When the ambulance rolled off, my van's cab did that wave thing it does when my blood pressure gets ideas. I sat in the driver's seat and blinked until the needles were numbers again. The superhero towel snapped on the porch railing like a flag. A landscaper in a wide hat knocked on my window and mouthed, "You good?" I nodded like a bobblehead and took long, slow pulls from a bottle until the sound in my ears stopped being bees. Then I did the part of the job the scanner can't see. I breathed, I counted the next 5 stops, and I started moving. That night, Mia drew a picture of a van under a sun with biceps, and the van wore sunglasses. She taped it to the freezer and wrote "drink" in bubble letters. My ex texted an article about our company trialing AC vans next year. I told her that was like trialing umbrellas after monsoon season. I tried to find news on Carla. Names are weirdly heavy in hospital phone trees, and learned only what privacy laws let you. For 3 days I ran the route with my stomach in a fist, and then, on day 4, a folded note sat on the paint can at space 52. Still here. Thank you. See. I put the note in my visor and cried once. Quick. Like lightning that changes no plans and still counts. The company handed out cooling towels and a laminated card that said signs of heat injury on one side and call your lead on the other. It helped and it didn't. I bought oral rehydration salts and started carrying them in the door pocket like contraband. I wrote a rule on the dash with a Sharpie because ink looks like law when your brain turns to oatmeal. No package until 2 sips. Other drivers laughed and then started asking for packets. For the van next to mine. That's how care migrates in a place that runs on piece rate. The app's route carousel never stops, and neither did the heat advisories. One afternoon a teenager slumped on a bus stop bench, head back, mouth open, the way sleep and trouble share a pose. You okay, man? I asked. Jay, he said, like I'd asked for his name and he wasn't sure if it was still his. I moved him into my shade and poured water across the back of his knees and wrists because my grandmother once did that for me after I fainted in a Sonoran grocery. He teared up because he didn't want the story that comes with an ambulance. I'll call, I said. They'll treat you like a person. He nodded like maybe he could believe both parts. The medic who arrived fist bumped me and said, keep doing the boring things. Boring saves lives. The next weekend I bought 6 blue coolers from the dollar store and wrote free water on them in squeaky marker. I dropped them at mailboxes around the park with a note. Refill if you can. Use if you need. The first week they emptied and I refilled. The second week I noticed a rotation. Neighbors with hoses, a kid with a pitcher, Carla's grandson skating by with a bag of ice like Santa in July. People like being deputized. A small, silly infrastructure appeared. Water trees, someone called them. It made 2 degrees of difference, which is a miracle here. I started sleeping with the weather radio on low. A tiny voice counting the hours until the next warning. On my day off, I sat in the van and practiced telling a supervisor I needed a 10-minute shade break without apologizing. I practiced texting Mia every afternoon. Drink a glass now. She replied with snowflake emojis like spells. At night, after the cicadas wound down, I could still hear the fan from Space 52. I don't think it was real. I think it was my head replaying the hour when the city asked us to be paramedics without the patch. By August, the grid was a rumor. Somewhere a substation tripped and the outage map filled its boxes like Tetris. Phones screamed conserve power in that siren font. The sky turned white and stayed there. In the park, swamp coolers coughed their last warm breath, then gave up. Heat moved into people's homes like an ant who doesn't believe in knocking. Dispatch told us to return to station unless we were in the red, behind on quota. I turned off the next left and started knocking. Space 19, George, 80-something domino champ, sitting barefoot on concrete because heat makes you do math wrong. I'm fine, he said. A minute later, I'm not fine. His AC had been a rumor even when the grid worked. I guided him to the van and let the fan lie convincingly while I called the city's cooling center number that rings in an office where a good person is always overwhelmed. The voice said the rec center had cots, water, a nurse. He won't go, I said. Tell him it's domino night, she said. I told him. He went, grumbling like a man agreeing with a song. The outage stretched. Extension cords appeared like hospital lines to the few apartments with batteries and solar. Strangers said yes to strangers' plugs. A woman in an electric wheelchair parked by the laundromat outlet and measured her life in bars. The owner let her stay after hours and taped a sign to the change machine. Quarters for everyone, because sometimes generosity is a jar. At dusk, I carried someone's mother down 3 stairs because going up is a skill you learn young and the subtraction of strength is a math that surprises you. On day 3, the councilman cruised by in a white SUV with AC like a commercial. He rolled his window a generous inch and asked if we were staying hydrated. Trying, I said. When will landlords have to keep AC running like they keep water on? He said jurisdiction and market and moved on. That night I wrote him an email in plain English and CC'd a reporter who had once called our neighborhood a mutual aid machine. Denisha, the organizer with the binder that could run a small nation, texted me at midnight. We're going to City Hall next week. Wear a clean shirt. The ordinance we dragged into existence a month later wasn't perfect, but it had teeth. If a heat advisory lasts more than a day, landlords must keep units at 82 or less or open an on-site cooling room with staff and cots. The fines weren't theater. The city said the number out loud. It also said the quiet part. The grid is a story we tell together, and we'd better keep it believable. I watched the vote on my phone in my kitchen, swamp cooler pouting, socks damp from the mop. When it passed, I texted Mia 3 blue hearts and a snowflake. Did we win? She asked. We got water in the bucket, I wrote. We have to keep carrying. Power returned to our block that night with a triumphant shrug. Lights clicked. Fridges sighed and remembered leftovers. TVs resumed the argument they'd paused mid-sentence. I listened to the hum like it was music from before I pretended I was too cool to feel anything. Outside, the neighbor kid saluted me with a melting popsicle. Stay frosty, Mr. Daniel, he said, and I promised to try. The next summer clocked in early, like the sun had gotten impatient. The company finally rolled out a handful of true AC vans and gave them to influencers with perfect hats. The rest of us kept our soft coolers and Sharpied rules. I became the driver new hires rode with, which meant I got to decide their first idea of what this job is. Pace is safety, I told them. Drink now, shade now. When someone looks weird, you don't ask if it's your business. You make it your business and apologize later. Carla waved from her porch most mornings. Some days I left a box. Some days I left ice. George mailed a thank you card in handwriting that looked like it was learning again. Jay texted a photo of a water bottle and his mom's smile and wrote, I'm drinking, Mr. Danny. My name is Daniel. Phoenix shortens you. The first monsoon dumped mercy across the park and the pavement steamed like a cooked thought. Kids ran barefoot. Adults looked up like cats who pretend they don't care about miracles. On a Tuesday, the radio said the West Side cooling site was full and a church gym across town had opened. Denisha asked if I could shuttle water between stops. I wedged cases around boxes of novelty cat mugs and beauty serums and delivered both kinds of hope. At the gym, a man I didn't know took a bottle with both hands like an heirloom. The nurse at intake taught me to check the inside of a wrist for coolness, the way the body keeps certain exits propped open. When I left, a little girl pressed a sticker of a snowman on my sleeve and said, Solemn, for your van. In August, the reporter came back because our new law had generated exactly 2 fines and a lot of compliance theater. She asked if anything changed. We're louder, I said, and better at knocking. She wanted a sentence you could put on a tote bag. I wanted shade on every porch and a grid that doesn't get shy. She filmed my cooler, my Sharpied, my ruined hats. On TV, I looked like a man who'd been practicing being ordinary in a disaster, which is my current religion. On the longest day, Mia and I sat on the stoop with otter pops and watched the sky decide whether to thunder or just glow. Do you hate Phoenix? She asked. I love it like a stubborn uncle, I said. You forgive a lot, and you make sure he drinks water. She laughed and leaned her sticky head on my arm. Etta, the little dog who used to be Carla's and now is mine, dreamed on her side and chased something only she could see. Somewhere an ambulance drew one straight line through the city's messy paragraph. Here's what I know, and it's not a moral so much as a taped-up list. Drink before you're thirsty. Check the vents. Don't bargain with heat. Carry a spare bottle for someone else. Write rules where your tired brain can't ignore them. Knock even if you're late. Put water where the world forgets it. Make July survivable on your block and call that a win even if the grid forgets its manners. When the weather map turns purple, I text Mia a snowflake and she sends back a dragon with a glass of water. I am a man in Phoenix with a cheap cooler, a blue van that lies about what it can do, a kid who tapes reminders to my freezer, and a neighborhood that decided hydration is a team sport. The air will go wrong again. Mine did, and I'm still here. When it does, I'll knock 3 times, set the cooler in the shade, aim the fan at the floor, call the number that rings in an office where a good person is always overwhelmed, and stay until the siren draws its line and the room learns its name back.